Welcome to this discussion on remote working, parallels from other worlds in this CPQ Smartcast. So we've got a bunch of interesting people here today. Folks, welcome back to the planet of the apes. It's 2020, and if you were away at other worlds, this is what has been happening on planet Earth. We used to be a social species. We were all sitting together in our offices, in our homes. We could tell the difference between our office and our homes. But now the planet is now available in a exciting new distributed flavor at a home near you. But hang on, haven't we been here before? Hasn't this planet here been here before? So for instance, people have expanded empires and found a way to manage this distributed workforce and hold on to that empire for a long time. Or we remember the outsourcing boom where people realized how it was possible to run entire operations away from a few meters from where they were located. Or it could be the distributed world of computing, wherein for years there have been algorithms, there have been systems, and in the last decade, that has all come together at scale. So you have the canonical two generals problem. How do you communicate with each other? Even if you're on an unreliable channel, you're far away and you have hostile parties in the middle. So we've solved many of these problems along the way. And there is much to learn from these. When we talk about 2020 and this whole brouhaha around everyone's working remotely, everyone's trying to grapple with the mental changes, the logistical changes, and the administrative changes of handling this. So we thought we'll talk a little bit about these analogies, and I know each one of you has a different take based on your own experiences, your own lens with which you look at the world. So we thought we will discuss some of these lenses and have this conversation. So essentially for the next 30 minutes, we'll do a quick tour of other worlds powered by this rocket fuel called Analogies, because Analogies is a great way of drawing insights from seemingly unrelated worlds, trying to map from our situation to that world and then come back with a newer understanding of what our world could be like. And as some people have thought, this could be a temporary phase. So maybe it will just briefly tell us something about ourselves that we would have otherwise not known. So uh, I'm first going to ask Prashant to chime in, because Prashant, you kicked us in this direction of this topic. So I know you have had some parallels that you've been drawing with the software engineering world. So go ahead, opening remarks from you.
Okay, as I speak, we've been in the fifth month of this lockdown. So all that seemed new now seems like cliches. So pardon me for that. But then let's just go through what we went through, right? So we were used to working in the office. We had certain structures working for us. And then suddenly we've now got used to working at home. But the structures that were working for us earlier are, at least in my experience, taking some time to actually adjust to this new way of working. At the periphery, people say that they've adapted to it. Things like unique engagement mechanisms with people, a lot of flexibility in work paradigms, given the fact that the work hours themselves are stretched, a lot more empathy being shown across the world. So all those aside, if we have to sustain this, because there are people actually saying that this, we're going to make this permanent, or we're going to make this part permanent, or there's going to be permanency in some proportion that will manifest itself in the future. So then the conversation I had with Harish was, how do we sustain something like this? Would the org structures or the age-old, tried and tested mechanisms of that existed, would they need to be relooked at? And at that point of time, I don't claim to be an expert. I could have, if I persisted being with Monish, because he was my original mentor in for C++ and Java, but then I chose another path. But then I don't claim to be an expert. But then, however, I was wondering if we could draw parallels from how software architecture itself has progressed over the years. If you see, we started from forget the mainframe era, but client server based, and then monolithic architecture. Then we started calling it as n-tier architecture. And then now suddenly we have a distributed architecture in a really scaled fashion, with cloud also coming into picture. Now, obviously, when the architecture has evolved and made so many evolutions, the way transactions happen also have evolved along with it, or have changed along with it. And so, if you look at what exists today, you have pockets of brilliance, or pockets of expertise, or pockets of, from an architecture perspective, or pockets of functionality that exist and that interface with other pockets or other boxes of functionality to deliver a solution. There are, I'm told, I really do not know the details, there are companies like Amazon that actually build businesses this way. Right? I'm told that even businesses interface with each other with the same paradigm. Now, if we have to apply it to our current model, whether it's in a functional team, say the product development team, where you have a director, then you have managers, then you have leads, and then you have engineers, or whether you take it to the organization as a whole, starting from the CEO, is there a place for reorganizing ourselves in a similar fashion as pockets? But at the same time, could there be a need for different kind of horizontal services, like in an architecture, that need to be actually working in the background subliminally to keep these things going? And when I say horizontal services, I really was not alluding to the regular ones, which are generalized, like HR, finance, admin, and all. Not those kinds, but within them, okay, is there a scope for horizontalizing and verticalizing and eliminating certain things in the new realm of possibilities? These thoughts that I had with Harish were very much at a 50,000 feet level, and that's where we said that it might make sense to get some people with technology background and a lot more experience to start speaking about these things, to see whether there is a room for such a thought. Just leave it at that, and just would like to hear others' views.
Thanks, Prashant. In fact, because you draw that analogy, there are some of these services that would not have existed in a pre-distributed era. For instance, someone who comes in and ensures that failures are deliberately handled, because you are expecting failures, you're not designing for a world where you say failures will never happen. Monish, any initial reactions listening to what Prashant said? Because you have spoken a lot about deliberately introducing chaos monkeys, for instance, and here you finally have a chaos gorilla who finally is going to put you to the test. So, any comments on this?
Yeah, so here's how we've been thinking about this in the last few months or weeks. So if you look at the situation, you also kind of to the haven't we been here before? If you look at some of the most complex software that's been in the world, like the Unix system, for example, or the Linux system and the ecosystem, most of this software has been built in an open source model where people have never worked with each other physically. They've all been remote, right? Why have commercial companies like us, and that includes everybody, including our companies as well as the Microsofts and the Googles, why have they not embraced much before this forced to work from home kind of situation arose? I think the only driving fact was that there were business people, there were managers who were always worried that they wouldn't get the efficiency if people work remotely, right? Because the idea was that people would be forced to work on things that they may not want to work on. That is always the premise when you hire someone, you get someone on board and you say, okay, now I have to do this because the business needs this. And individuals probably don't care about the business as much, right? So the analogy in our minds when we started was, hey, why don't we think about this as open source data? And if you look at that analogy, then there are two parts to it. One part is now, how do you bring that pride of delivery? Because that's what drives the open source community. But the pride of delivery, now the additional challenge in a commercial setting is the pride of delivery also has to be coupled not with the beauty of the software and the elegance of the software, but the beauty of the solution to the customer and the money you make. The commercial aspect has to go together. And which means that you have to replicate the pride of the founders, of the senior leadership, who have a lot more monetary and personal and emotional stake in the company, and replicate it elsewhere. So when Harish shared that initial thing with me, I think what resonated was, you're also looking at how do I drive this culture, this pride, this set of values down to people we have never met physically before. So in the last 5 months, we have hired 230 people remotely where nobody's ever met anybody, except for the admin people who hand over the laptops, the courier guys. Apart from that, there's been no physical contact. We've got 230 people on board who are in this ecosystem of open source development, right? And it's not just software engineers. It is, it's people in finance. We hired a finance leader who could be like, who reports to our CFO and who could be the Asia Pac head, which is a, very senior for our size, a very senior role. And nobody's ever met him physically before. And before that, before the lockdown, I used to make sure that every exec above general manager and above, I used to invite their whole family home so that we could interact and we could get before we made an offer. And now we're suddenly into that, hey, I've never even physically met this one person before who is being hired. So that's where the chaos monkey thing bit in, said, hey, now you have an ecosystem. You don't know where that ecosystem is going to go, whether it's going to work for you, whether you're doing the right things or not. How do you find out whether you're doing the right things on a regular basis and get that feedback? Is to create disruptions in the system, is to create some artificial and tell people that you're creating that, because without that, they would be sidetracked. And I thought that might be a very good analogy. And it's not just Chaos Monkey. If you look at the Simian Army, the Netflix Simian Army has different functions, right? There's function on quality, there's function on resilience, there's a function on scale. And then you introduce these changes to see how people react. And as soon as you know that people are not reacting the right way, you pull it back or you change the behavior of people. And that's why I thought that this analogy might be better suited, because it's not replication. Actually, replication is scary in these scenarios in my mind. You don't want to replicate the director, manager, tech lead scenario in different places or in different worlds or in different virtual worlds even in functionally, but you want to actually now make it a level playing field for everybody. And hopefully on the engineering side, you eliminate the need for managers and directors. That's the holy grail that you want to go to, which means you want to make sure that you're testing and refining this on a daily basis by creating disruption. So that was the analogy that kind of resonated when I read what Harish had sent me. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's just a different twist to all of it.
And I'm going to get Nitin to also talk about what he's heard so far. And we also had a question for him, because the last time we met Nitin in person, he showed us around a lovely office that they've had, and they've designed that office because, like many of you, that as part of the experience, that as making a difference how people work. And now in this open source distributed, all each man for himself model, like we have behind us, I have a different background to what Nitin has. A bunch of lovely books that I can't help getting distracted by. So how are you thinking about not just the points that these folks said? In some sense, it's like setting up the right, going back to the software analogy, it's having the same environment, which is what the whole move towards virtual machines, containerization is all tried to bring, that a certain stability to how things are delivered, and very quickly so as well. Nitin, over to you.
Sure. Yeah, so what Monish said resonated a lot, because you said, Monish, that 230 people you've onboarded, but the denominator was in thousands. We have onboarded 150 on a denominator of 450, which means that almost more than 25% of my staff today is completely, nobody has ever seen anybody before, including some teams. Like we built a info security team from scratch, 100%, starting from the manager to the last person. Nobody has ever been to the office, nobody has seen each other. Now that's a kind of scary thought, actually. And Raman, to your point about having designed that whole office with so much care, all I can do now is in Teams I set up the photographs of my office as background, and when I'm interviewing people, tell them that, look, this is what the office looks like. The point is that it's definitely a complete shift from what we were used to. You mentioned a finance leader. I'll give you an anecdote. So we recently hired a finance person, not at the top leader, but like a next level. And the person was in a different country, and he was waiting to come back through this Vande Bharat mission, etc. And he joined, and everything started going well. But guess what? We have never met him. We have only interacted with him like we are interacting right now. And within 1 month, he tells us that I've decided to, when I come back, I've decided to go to Bangalore and take some other position. is there anything wrong with what we are doing? Nothing wrong. So that if had it been in a real life situation, I am pretty sure that this would not have happened because of that connect and even the you get a feel for when you're talking to the person, the body language, the you read more. The video doesn't give you half of what in person. Now this is a huge problem according to me. And what Monish has done, like in having a kit and giving some kind of a thing, I think all the companies are doing that, and we are trying to make some kind of standardization, some kind of what I if you can distinguish remote working from home. I read somewhere that work from home is like an exception, meaning you normally are expected to work from the office and you're working from home, whereas remote working means you're that's the norm. And I hate to use the word, but Ramanand, the new norm, as they say. But
You said it once.
yeah, I know. I'm going to make sure I don't say it again. But so that's a real problem. And the other thing that I feel in terms of working like this in completely remote teams, I do agree that the structure that we have has to change. I think I meet with my managers to get a pulse for what's happening with their teams and so on. And just before this meeting, I had a discussion with the manager, and I quickly realized that do I really need him now? Seriously, it's like all the norms, the standards are there, the expected output is there, the processes are all set. So what exactly is the manager contributing there? For that matter, what am I contributing now? In terms of we used to we used to have this delusion that we are doing, we are guiding the people, we are setting we are the role models, this, that. Bullshit. It's like people are doing stuff on their own. And again, Monish, back to your point, why are they working for us? Why are they doing what we expect them to do? And we have realized already, I'm sure you have also, that when you can clearly distinguish between the people who are working because somebody was watching over their shoulder, and most of them are not like that, fortunately. And there are people who who want to work because they are enjoying their work. So how do we make more and more people go towards setting the sort of not goals really, but setting the shared vision so that they feel like working and then do it on their own without anybody having to supervise or anything to do with that. And that's a different kind of a thing, particularly when you're not even seeing the person. It's one thing to like people talk about charismatic leaders and you stand and oratorial skills and you stand and give a speech and all of that. You can't do anything of that sort now, right? It's all so to me it's like, and talking about analogies, I think it's if why do we watch movies where, for example, it may be a completely shitty movie, but if it's a Nasiruddin Shah playing a role or Irfan Khan playing a role, they are not heroes. They are not uh, traditionally like somebody you want to go and watch their face, but they engage you and through their emotions, you connect with those emotions and so on. So my analogy would be that we need to learn now. The new leaders have to be the Nasiruddin Shahs and the Irfan Khans of the world. They are watching you on the screen. They're not even seeing you, but you need to connect with them, even though it's virtual. So that's the analogy which kind of came to my mind when I was thinking about this. And really, when we are watching some of these, whether it's web series or movies, it moves you. Either it makes you very happy or it makes you literally shed tears. And knowing fully well this is all make believe, right? It's nothing is real in that. So how do we bring that sense of drama, that sense of emotion into the workplace? And those are the kind of leaders that we probably need to have. And obviously people need to be now self starters, right? It's no longer possible for you to sit next to him and show the person how this is how you do it, and there's only so much you can do remotely. That's, I think, Monish, you hit the nail on the head. The kind of leadership structures that we need and the characteristics that we need for leadership are going to be totally different. I don't think the foot soldier is the skills are going to change much. Of course, you need them to be more self-driven and self-charters, etc. But that was always the case. I don't think that has changed that much significantly. But the people who are going to orchestrate this, they need to have very different qualities now. And I frankly don't know whether we have the qualities. I don't know whether we have
Yeah.
the what it takes to really lead the people in this new world.
Yeah.
That
So
is
I had a point which I want to actually from what Nitin mentioned. In fact, there's when Harish and I were speaking, now I recall one of the things that comes up, one is the emergence of the number of meetings, right? I think the number of meetings have gone up. The quality of the meeting is different. I'm not commenting on whether it's good or bad, it's different. However, if I go back to the earlier world, there was a certain thing in those meetings or in informal discussions wherein the context could be relayed a lot easier than the way it is done today. One of the things that had come to my mind when Harish and I were speaking was, would new roles emerge? When I meant horizontals, I actually meant things like this. Some of you might have read this book by Seth Godin called as Lynchpin. Would there be a possibility to have a horizontal of linchpins whose only job is to make sure that they are permeating the contexts of various things in the company across to the people, because that is getting missed out. That did not exist before because it was subliminal, right? People got it, but now people don't get it. So I was actually looking at brainstorming on what are these other things that could emerge that might be required, and especially for a company that burgeoning like Icertis, making sure that the principles and values reach down to all those 230 new hires, which was done in a much easier way before. Roles such as this become all the more critical. So that was the thought.
And
So Manish, before you answer that, I want to introduce two elements for you to also talk about. One is taking a cue, say, from how politics is done or religion is done. Right? They have mastered the art of cultural influence at scale, at different levels, which perhaps connects to what Prashant is saying. So the roving cultural ambassador, or even how sports fans have sitting in Manchester, a city that most of the fans in India have never seen, can't place on a map, but will for and buy all that merchandise for. I don't know what jersey Prashant is wearing today, but we will put him in that kind of
This is
league.
the India Blue.
So you have a good reason there. But the other thing is, since you also are part of the world of gaming in many ways. So games are interesting because again they have that element of people spending so much time voluntarily. The way games have become at scale distributed, the virtual world you enter in and you leave behind everything else. Tell us a few of these things along with the point you wanted to make earlier.
I think that's a very good analogy as well. I think I'll start with one comment on what Nitin said. I think it resonates quite a bit. And Samir and I do this exercise every year. We figure out one-on-one conversation on whether we are fit to run the company and the role we are playing for the next year, right? So that's been a ritual for the last 8 years now. And this year, I think we'll have a much harder conversation because we have to change ourselves, or we have to leave and have someone else take that role. So I completely resonate with Nitin. I think there's another thing though, that yes, we do need the Irfan Khans and we do need the Nasiruddin Shahs, but we also need the Shah Rukhs and the Salmans in my mind. And that is exactly the religion and politics connection that I can segue into. Because this is a world of marketing, right? Open source, for example, people have that passion because there is this community, there is this thrill of winning, there's this thrill of getting stars, recognition, whatever you call it, right? People get these kicks from very different ways. But also the marketing of the projects. When Apache was released as a web server, the reason why the whole community just burgeoned was because two or three large organizations ran their very public facing websites on Apache. And everybody said, oh my goodness, I want to be part of that because it's a special project, right? And that means that you have to get your Amitabhs and Salmans and Shah Rukh Khans to do the marketing. And I think that's an indivisible kind of aspect of today's life. You have to do your marketing right. Religions thrive on marketing and ritual, right? You cannot have religions without them. Politics, if you look at Trump, for example, there's a very different way of marketing that he brings in where everybody in the world, probably there's no other politician in the world that is so known. Well known is a bad word, but at least known in the world, right? Which means he's done something right for what he wanted. Maybe it's bad, but he's done something right for what he wanted. So you need that to get people together on a common cause. The Irfans and the Nasiruddins cannot do that to a certain extent. You really need to bring that. That was one take. I think the second thing is in this conversation that I find very interesting is you can actually learn from some of these analogies, right? And I think that was one of the things, Ramanand, you started with, that yeah, how do we borrow from these analogies and do things what we're doing, how do we do them better? I think one thing clearly stands out is, and from Nitin's conversation also, is that we have to figure out what changes we have to introduce at the leadership level so they can cascade down. And that is, again, ties back to disruption, because unless you try things out which you've never tried before, it's scary. And I'll tell you a real story. It was very interesting. And when we started Icertis, when we were like 15 people, was that, hey, we all work from home, right? Have full work from home privileges. And people came back and said, no, this is very tough because we don't have the environment to work from home. And then all the senior people, including Samir, said, no, we will not be able to figure out whether they're working or not, efficiency, are they in the same, and important that everybody comes together. Rewind now, even in these times, I go back to my engineering leader. He says, no, I need 2 weeks before a release to plan. I want everybody in the office to plan the release. And I said, you have not changed your thinking. You change your thinking enough, you have not changed it to be disruptive. Because if you think that personal interaction is so important, which it is, you can't deny it. But if you think personal interaction is so important, you are thinking that the whole open source development is a failure, which it is not. So there must be some way that you can do better, that you can come up with these ideas. And I think that is where this religion and politics also comes in, and gaming also comes into that extent. If you look at Pokemon, the only reason it went so viral was that you had something to do. And when you did that, like a physical exercise, right? Not just virtual, but a physical exercise where you want to go to a place and you tag it, and you're the first person in the world to do that. That is a special feeling, right? So you have to make people feel special. And it may be a very crappy interface, but it gives you those kicks that you're looking for to make it viral, right? And engineering and running a company is also now getting to be like that. You have to get people there and explain to them why they are so special. And you have to do that virtually, which means you have to come up with a completely different set of skills. I think and I'll leave it there, I'll stop, I've been rambling on. But one important thing I've learned, if I have to talk about myself, one skill I've learned is to do videos. These 2-minute, 3-minute videos. I've never been a big blogger, but I've changed myself completely to do these small videos. I think it's such a big impact on people. Seeing, I did a video yesterday explaining what did I do in my home office setting to make me more productive? What are the apps I'm using? How am I reminding myself to drink water, to move when I'm in a long call and take a small walk? And how I've set up my monitor and how I've set up my camera and what tools do I use to reduce background noise. I think people just love that kind of stuff now. So I'll
Monish, before you go ahead, we would also love to have that video, by the way.
I'll share it. You don't want to hear me talking anyway anymore.
Before I get Sirisha and Harish in, we did the exact same exercise yesterday with one of our teammates. And suddenly they had, her skill, she's done this in the past for something else. And it just has come in totally handy right now. So Nitin, I just want to give you one couple of lines before I go to Sirisha and Harish, which is that something that Prashant also mentioned ties to the anecdote you told us, which is that we've said that all these systems were there to keep us efficient. We were used to them. It's tried and tested. Are we finally, and the disruption brings a certain, we have to maybe sacrifice a little bit of efficiency in the short term before we get to something that works for us. So do you think that people around you are finally ready to let go a little bit of efficiency for loyalty, for calls like these, for spreading the message, for doing the kinds of things that you would find inefficient in the past?
Yeah, absolutely. I think people have realized that these are the kind of things that you need. In fact, one of the things, I'm sure every company is doing that, but even this whole water cooler talk, simulating a water cooler talk, or so what we have started doing is people across teams setting up, pairing them up and saying that, look, you talk to each other for whatever, 20 minutes, and find out some fun fact about them and then share that with us. Those kind of things, which is almost forcing. Monish talked about how he takes a water break, this, that, but forcing people to do these kind of things, which are traditionally speaking, in the good old days when we were working in the office, pool table gaya to gaya. But we didn't never realize that time, and including myself, it was considered as a overhead. People are spending too much time and not working. And now we are almost forcing people, please do this. It's exactly the opposite of what we were used to earlier. So I think it's very important. It's in fact, I just realized day before yesterday that since the first of this year, first January of this year, I have not taken a single day off. Now I said to myself, this is ridiculous. I'm preaching to the others, right? You should take some time off. You should disconnect. I have not taken a single day off. So, I'm thinking of now doing that finally. So these are the kind of things which you have to be told now. Because now, you're not going out, you're not going for entertainment, birthdays are celebrated at home, you can't travel. Why do you need the leave for? That was the way, it happened. But then consciously you have to say that, look, leaves are required not just for all this, but to disconnect, to recharge, right? So I think what you said is absolutely important, and we need to make a conscious effort to propagate this and tell people that it's not only is it okay, it is actually desirable.
That is true. So, if you don't mind, Raman, I'll make one comment, quick one. So, well said, Nitin. I think one thing we did was when this whole lockdown started, we moved our quarterly all hands to weekly all hands. I'm not kidding. Worldwide, company-wide all hands, we did weekly all hands. And then we did 4 of them. And then we did a poll saying, hey, is it too much information? And people said, yeah, it's just one hour every week. It's interesting, but you're also now doing videos and stuff we could do with less. So then we changed to 15 days, because that's what the poll said. Let's do 15 days, not 1 month, but 15 days. One of the things was to push all of this, right? What you have to do, how do you interact? So we had a full 15-minute topic on kind of HR, what to do and how to cope up. And then a 15-minute topic on, hey, what's happening with our COVID preparedness and all of that. And people resonated with that. Then we changed that. And this is in the last 4 months, right? We've never had this kind of disruption in all hands before, right? So then we changed the structure to say one 15-day all hand will do completely tech. I run that all hands meeting. And then the next 15-day, the next one after 2 weeks, Samir does. So people get a business update and then they get a technology update, which we had never done before. I had never done a all hands before in the last 10 years. But I started that because we now wanted to make sure that people came together in form or the other. And just like a religion, you have a ritual now, right? You say, hey, you do this, वो गणपति के ऊपर दूध डाला तो ऐसा होता है, पुण्य लगता है. All of that, if you wear a mask, if you do social distancing, when you come to the office, take permission, that ritual has helped people just focus. And then we put these 4 rings of responsibility, just like idol, which you pray to, and agarbatti. So you said you take care of yourself, then your family, then your community, then your business. And people just got focused. I'll stop there, but I think that was from Nitin's comment. I think it's very critical for us that it really gave us some return back, right?
So it was great to see. I've been talking about these things, but it's good to see some of these real examples that you're trying to figure out. It's become very efficient to run all hands meetings on the flip side is what I'm also taking away. Okay, so Sirisha, I want to come to you quickly on a topic that Nitin briefly touched upon. I know you are very fond of that, which is we need managers anymore. Having been one yourself and managed a lot of managers, this has been an existential crisis waiting to happen. So how do you see people around you dealing with that?
In fact, that was a question that I wanted to ask Monish, Prashant, Nitin. All of them spoke about reorganizing. Do organizations need restructuring now? I've been talking to a lot of leaders and managers of late, a lot of business leaders of young startups, and increasingly most of them are actually moving towards something called as a pod structure, or effectively a holocratic model where you really don't have managers and leaders. And surprisingly, most of them went for that because they couldn't afford the managers. So what do bigger organizations, what does it take for bigger organizations to change like that? Where Monish, you also spoke about business and IT interacting and actually getting the updates, right? What about moving to structures where business and IT work together on a particular project, say a pod, which is one release or which is one set of features of a product that is being developed?
I think that has always been happening, right? I think the change here that has happened probably is that you don't allocate people, but you allocate a team and its bandwidth. I think that structural change, it's tough, so it's not happened completely, but it is happening now. That you say that, hey, when you're developing this feature, because now you kind of divide teams across, that is hard to change. People think about it in a certain way. This feature has this team, database team is separate, and IT infrastructure is separate. That dissociation comes harder, so it's a journey. But for all others, I think it is now bandwidth based as opposed to people based. And that has made a big difference. And I think, to Nitin's point again, it is important to see what is the role of the manager now, because people figure this out on themselves now. And you're now looking at Jira and saying, hey, there are 5 things to do for infrastructure today. I have some time, I'll pick up one of them. Yeah. And as soon as that happens, the tools are there. People are now forced to go into the system more, because their work now, instead of talking to, hey, what happened to this bug? Now you have to go to TFS, because there is no one sitting next to you, and chatting is still intrusive, right? So those changes we are already seeing, I think.
Okay.
Absolutely. I think it is now team-based. The manager's role is decreasing very quickly. In fact, in my team, 2 managers have already transformed officially to individual contributors. And I feel that it's a good sign for a company where people volunteer and say, hey, now I can actually code, or I can do this product management, or I can do the business requirements myself, as opposed to manage people, because I don't have enough work to do.
Yeah. And one other thing that has been constantly coming up is delayed decision making because of having remote teams. So how true is that? Is it more the mindset problem, or is it really a challenge that the leaders and managers are facing?
Can I take that? So actually, I question that. I think things have become much faster. Decision making is much faster now, because earlier you had to wait till everybody could physically meet, right? There was a meeting, and that meeting, scheduling that meeting, people used to spend a lot of time to figure out when you can meet. Now those meeting scheduling is so much easier, and much, because everybody is, you don't have to be in the same place at the same time. So I think in my experience, things have become much easier to decide and move on. Sometimes even not even physically meeting on a video, but literally over chat or something, things are getting decided.
Yeah.
Okay.
I also agree. I think, but I'm afraid it is probably a passing thing, right? And the reason I say that is because today, actually, I don't have any distraction sitting at home. I'm not going to Vaishali in the evening. I'm not going to the gym in the morning. I'm not commuting to this. So I have more time. And then people around me at home are irritated if there's too much interaction too, right? So now what do I do in my spare time? I either play games or I work. Work is an easier thing. That means I get more done. That means the decision flows faster. But I think we see that drop in decision making a little bit more as we go along. I think it's hard to predict. I'm not sure if I have an answer to that. I think my guess is we'll do faster decision making, just because we'll get used to, as Nitin rightly said, we don't have to find a time to meet. But at the same time, people are also wary, because they don't get these signals whether Samir is liking what I'm doing or not, or Monish, he might be unhappy because I can't see his face because he's not turned on his video today. I don't know if that will play a factor in the decision making process, because no matter what, I think this sense of authority, or someone who I want to be on my side when I take a decision, I think that is human, and that doesn't go away very easily. So, yeah, I think I would like to pass on that question in terms of whether I really know the answer or not. I don't.
Okay, so Sirisha, we have 5 minutes on the clock. So I just want to get Prashant to also chime in on the point you brought in about 2 things actually. One is managers, what do you see happening there? And secondly, you're a sports fan. You have seen different kinds of sports organizations that lead sporting teams to success. Something we can draw from that, because sports teams don't have managers. They have coaches, they have assistant coaches, they have people looking after administration, and you have players. What can we draw from that? So 2 points to talk about.
Prashant, you're on mute. Prashant, then before you start, I want to also pick your brains on the whole concept of the white line fever. So what are the rituals, like Monish was mentioning, which get you in that state of mind, that altered state of mind, that when you enter the field, you're a completely different person. So if you can add about what we can learn from that in this workspace, that'll also be good.
Okay, are you mistaking me for MS Dhoni by any chance? Because I don't think I'm an expert, but nevertheless, I'll try to bring that part in by extrapolating. But then to Sirisha's point and the sports analogy, the question about whether decision making is delayed. The analogies look at a football field, right? Most of the key decisions, the big ones, are taken before. So the coach, you go with a goal. You say that let's assume it's a league encounter. You say that we need to win by a margin of 2 goals. So we need an offensive strategy. So we're going to have more people here. This is how it's going to work. Now, and that's where the coach comes in. All of us on the call here play primarily the role of the coach. But once the game starts, the decisions, you're not involved. You just shout from the outside. Whether it's going to impact or not, it's different. Some people don't shout as well, right? I mean, they're just very silent outside. But then decisions still happen on the field, and outcomes are achieved pretty much in tune with what was decided earlier, at least for the winning team. Now, the point I wanted to bring was, it's also, I think, important for us as leaders to know that we need to reduce the number of decisions we need to be involved in. Number one, we need to be involved only in the key ones and let it go through, right? Because things will happen nevertheless. At least what I have observed is that a lot of the decisions that used to come to me now don't come, and yet things are happening, or maybe they're not required at this point of time, and I'm happy in that world. That there are just very few which I would consider high value decisions. There's a trickle of the low value ones also come. There are very few high value decisions where I really feel that I need to be involved in and I'll add value. I think even though it might be passing, I think one thing that might stay, Monish, to your point, is probably this aspect where leaders will stay away from certain decisions. Because in India, I keep stating this, we are a culture of instruction takers, right? From, at least I would not say that about our kids' generation. I think they are a slightly evolved lot, but at least the lot that we've grown up, most of us have grown up saying, tell us what to do and we'll do it. And we're great at doing that. It's a great time to transform that culture. Some of them might go away. Some of them might actually perish, not being able to transform. But then certain people might, like Monish's example, 2 managers decided that we are going to be individual contributors, and which means that we are in our realm of working. We'll keep doing it. We don't need to either tell people what to do or be told too much of what to do. So some people will stay, some people will go away, but I think it could be a cathartic process, but it's a good process to actually go through for the industry. If we are actually aspiring to go along with the high valued geographies and the innovative ecosystems that we want to be. So that is the point I would make. Now, in terms of mindset, I think from leaders, that keeping that mindset, number one. Number two, I always keep stating on 2 things. One thing is, whether it's an individual or whether it's a function or whether it's a group, unless you focus on the value that you're bringing in, right? So it brings up that question of specialist or generalist. So unless you're not clear about what is the value you're bringing into the company, to your group, or to a conversation, I think you will drift. So you need to be very clear as to what is that value, the differentiated value that you're bringing in, right? Number one, and then just stay focused on that. Everything else, you can decide whether you want to be partake in that or not, especially when it comes to decisions. As an example, I don't need to partake in knowing whether the wall needs to be painted beige or white. It doesn't matter. I need to be a part of something else, whether it's about a decision on the future technologies we need to invest in, and how do we go about doing that. Yeah, I need to be involved in.
So last 2 minutes. So Harish, I want you to talk about an analogy that we have been discussing on the whole change from line of sight to line of no sight. So to that, and then we will close with our question, because we always ask questions. We'll close with that.
Yeah, something that we've been talking about is moving from this line of sight. You've all mentioned, a lot of the cues, signals that you get are from body language and what people are saying, how are they behaving, their expressions. But now suddenly you've actually got to the world of radar. You need to have some other proxy metrics, proxy senses to get an idea of what is happening. Just imagine yourself sitting in London in 1940-41, where the German planes are now coming and bombing, and you have absolutely no idea, but you need to take decisions. You need to think about what's going to happen. Sometimes what we're doing right now sounds similar to that, right? Where you're sitting here you are probably safe in your individual bubble, bio bubble / cocoon, but you need to take decisions for others on behalf of others, and those could have big ramifications. So what is it that you need to have as information or as data / metrics to base these decisions on? It's more of the sense of radar that you need to have. A lot of these are going to be probably derived metrics. You're going to take a leap of faith that this metric probably indicates so and so emotion or feeling or value or behavior, and then you're going to take those decisions. So it's interesting to know what are these metrics that you can look at, and the next question then begs is that, okay, what can you do to impact those metrics? So I think the first question of just identifying those metrics itself is a tricky one. So we are looking at it in terms of this radar versus line of sight and analogy as well. Yeah.
Ironically, it started with bats and we have come back to bats.
I was thinking about that.
Right. Okay, so we covered a lot of ground, so we'll bring this to a close in the next 30 seconds. We love our quizzing as all of and have been in some of that. So we have a question for you. Open on, you can unmute yourself and you can go for the answer. So here's a question. We are all familiar with the Braille system. The Braille system was created in 1937 by Louis Braille. A few years later, there was this moon system. Okay, so this is what the moon system looks like. It's also a system for the blind. Question is, why did the moon system for the blind emerge even though Braille was good enough? So what was the problem that the moon system was trying to develop? And moon is also an eponymous system like Braille. This was a person called Moon who created it partly for his own reasons. So it's open come to try guessing and we.
So to count the number of dots in Braille system?
Okay, no, good guess, not the right answer, Nitin.
That's interesting. I think, does it have to do with discrete and continuous?
That's the engineer. It's an system that he created for himself because Braille wasn't good enough for him. It would have been a lot more difficult for him. And that's the reason that motivated the creation of this. So, any guesses? Okay, so something to moon happened to him at a certain point in his life that made him go for this. So, what could have happened?
Prashant, you're on mute again.
He was not blind to begin with.
He turned blind after some.
Right, and so then can you figure out why he came up with this?
So this is the actual system. If some of the alphabets resemble the actual English alphabet, so this is closer to it.
Absolutely. So we will split points between Prashant and Nitin and give an engineering badge to Monish for this one. If you look at the moon system, it resembles the English alphabet. So here was someone who's already used to that. And this late in life, he found it difficult to switch to Braille, which is a completely different system. It's as arbitrary as the Sumerians coming up with some bunch of letters that we now call A to Z, and came up with something that evolved from the existing alphabet. If you lost your sight later in life, you could use the moon system. It hasn't taken off in the same way as Braille has, but that gives us a clue as to how sometimes it's really hard to let go of what you already know, but you need to still make that effort to evolve. And for us, these are three things that we have been thinking about as further analogies. One is the whole astronaut system, right? You have mission control on Earth, and you have all these guys far away who perhaps the communication links are slow. You only get to make maybe one major decision a day with the help of ground central. Everything else is your problem. And you also have to live in a non-socially distant way with your fellow mates. And I'm sure all of you are doing that as well.
And you have all the PPs and
True. Then you also have the prisoner's mindset. You are in solitary confinement or you've been made to stay inside. There are plenty of very interesting books written by first-hand experiences that we heard of. So that's something that we thought was very interesting, very valuable in a situation like this. And finally, we spoke about disability teaching us how to activate another sense, the radar we were talking about. If you're entirely on one type of sense, maybe how do you pick something else? So like the blind person or the Braille and moon system, a nice article on what people who have impaired of hearing can teach about visual communication. These kinds of influences can come from different places. We just want to close with maybe there is something called as an overview effect, staying with the world of space. Just that when astronauts go to space, they have this different awareness of the world. They look at the world as suddenly you're part of this. You see the marble. You see a small little fragile planet, and it puts things into perspective. Maybe irrespective of whether this is permanent or temporary, maybe the last 6 months would have given us a little bit of an overview effect in terms of our place in the world and what we are doing there and what we should all do for each other. So on that note, thank you all for being with us, and it's great to hear all of you. We'll bring this to a close.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think I enjoyed